Hi everybody, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my opinion as to whether I think Julian Edelman should be in the Hall of Fame. Now before I get into that, my just general view of the Hall of Fame is it should be reserved for the best of the best players, right? So if your career was good, maybe even very good, you should not be able to be in the Hall of Fame just for having a good or very good career. Again, there's so many players that play, especially in the NFL, that in order to make the Hall of Fame, you should be one of the best at your position in that decade that you played or that era that you played. So let me get into Julian Edelman, right? Obviously, if you didn't hear the news, he did retire about a couple days ago. And obviously, right after he retired, a lot of the news stories surrounded him were, is he a Hall of Famer or not? And there's obviously cases that can be made for both sides. I think everyone who makes the case for him being a Hall of Famer obviously focuses in on the postseason statistics. He is second in almost every category, right behind Jerry Rice in almost every postseason category. But obviously there are cases for him to not be in the Hall of Fame as well. Now, before I get into the statistics, my personal opinion is I do not think he should be in the Hall of Fame. And reason for me is I kind of use postseason success to determine like tiebreakers, right? To me, if a guy is like on the fringe Hall of Famer, because based on his season statistics, if he had a good postseason, I'll use that to maybe say, okay, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Whereas if he's on the fringe and didn't have a great postseason career, I will use that to say, okay, maybe you can not have him in the Hall of Fame. So before you turn off this video because you want him to be in the Hall of Fame, let me go over the reasons why. So on the career receptions list, he ranks 75th all time. He finished his career with 620 receptions. He is just ahead of guys like Jordy Nelson, Deshaun Jackson, and Travis Kelce. And he's just below some guys like LT, LaDainian Tomlinson, Johnny Morton, Keenan Allen. So from those names right there, the guys he's just ahead of, I don't think any of them are going to the Hall of Fame other than Travis Kelce, but his career is far from over, so he may blow past that 620 receptions number. And of the guys that he's ahead of, right, of course LT is in the Hall of Fame, but he played running back. So for LT to finish his career with more receptions than Julian Edelman, when Julian Edelman's main position is wide receiver, right, it's not a great argument to be made for Julian Edelman. And obviously Keenan Allen, he's young as well, so he's going to probably blow past the number he's at. Unfortunately, it gets worse when you go to the receiving yardage leaders, right? He ranks 156th all time. He finished his career with 6,822 yards. He's just ahead of guys like Larry Centers, Randall Cobb, Alshon Jeffrey, and he's just ahead of guys like Charlie Hennigan and Odell Beckham Jr. So obviously from that list as well, guys like Randall Cobb, Alshon Jeffrey, those guys are probably not going to be Hall of Famers. And even the guys ahead of him, right? Odell Beckham, he is so young and he's missed almost 2 seasons now. I guess maybe like 10 games each season where he got hurt. So he's probably missed about 20-ish games in his career, and he's already has more receiving yards than Julian Edelman had in a 12-year career. And then when it comes to the receiving touchdown category, he ranks 254th in the all-time list. He finished his career with 36 touchdowns. The guys that he's next to are Brandon Lloyd, Julius Thomas, and just above him is Eric Green, Anthony Fasano, and Owen Daniels. It's really weird. All of them are tight ends except for Brandon Lloyd. It's kind of tough to put a guy in the Hall of Fame who's 75th on the all-time receptions list, 156th on the all-time receiving yards list, and 254th on the all-time receiving touchdowns list. So obviously when you look at his regular season numbers, that is the biggest reason as to why I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Now again, I understand the people who look at his postseason success and use that to determine whether he's a Hall of Famer or not. But to me, I don't really like doing that just in general, but especially at the wide receiver position. But to me, postseason success, even from an individual perspective, is still about who you're with and what team you're on. Whereas in the regular season, you can be on a bad team and still make it to the Hall of Fame because you are so good at what you do. Now, just for reference here, the reason why I don't want to put Julian Edelman in is because if you put a guy like Julian Edelman in, what it does is it opens up the conversation to put more guys in. And again, my initial thought about the Hall of Fame is it's reserved for the best of the best. So again, I'll give you some examples actually. To me, if you were to allow Julian Edelman in the Hall of Fame, there's an argument that could be made that both guys like Wes Welker and also Chad Johnson deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, obviously, those two players' postseason resumes are not as good as Julian Edelman's. But when you look at their regular season numbers, again, let me read off Edelman's. It was 620 receptions, 6,822 yards, and 36 touchdowns. When you compare that to Wes Welker finished with 903 catches, so almost 300 more, 9,924 receiving yards, so 3,200 receiving yards more, 3,100 receiving yards more. And then he finished with 50 touchdowns, so 14 more than Julian Edelman. So he was literally better in every single statistic in the regular season than Julian Edelman. So again, if you were to put Edelman into the Hall of Fame and you say, okay, well, we're using his postseason success as the reason why, people can then say, well, Wes Welker was just a better slot receiver, put up more production in every category, so why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? And now you have to argue as to why Wes Welker should or shouldn't be in it. And then just to have another guy the same position but not a slot receiver, we'll use Chad Johnson, who's not in the Hall of Fame, and I don't think he was probably going to get in, especially since, as the years go on, it's just tougher to get in as a wide receiver, or really any position for that matter. So Chad Johnson finished his career with 766 catches, a little more than Edelman, but a little less than Welker. He had 11,059 receiving yards though, so more than the both of them. And then he finished with 67 touchdowns, which is a lot more than Julian Edelman. Now again, the postseason success for both those players are not as good as Edelman's, so obviously you can debate as to which one was the better receiver. But I think if you were going to draft one of those three players in their prime, you may take Edelman last, because I think you're definitely, if you watched him play, you are definitely taking Chad Johnson, right? For that 4 or 5 year period, he was unstoppable, right? He literally made 2 or 3 All-Pros in a row and 5 or 6 Pro Bowls in a row. And I want to say during that stretch, he led the AFC in receiving yards in 3 consecutive seasons. Now, like I said, I think that you can use postseason success as like a tiebreaker type scenario. And I'll give you the perfect quarterback for an example. So me personally, I believe that Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Fame, right? When you look at Eli Manning's statistics, right, obviously he played so many games, he started almost all of them, so his statistics are pretty high. But if you look at his all-time ranks, he's 8th in passing yards, 9th in passing touchdowns, and then he's 14th all-time in fourth quarter comebacks. Right? So he is pretty much in the top 10 or fringe top 10 in almost all of those categories. Obviously, everyone understands that at no point during his career was he considered a top 5 quarterback. He really only had that 1 year, really in 2011, where he put up top 5 quarterback statistics. But the consistency you got out of Eli every single year, some of that consistency was not great, right? Because he did do a lot of interceptions. But again, so when you use a guy like Eli Manning, for example, his statistics are close to Hall of Fame worthy, right? Again, you finish in the top 10 in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and you're in the top 15 in fourth quarter comebacks. Your statistics are Hall of Fame worthy. And then again, if you want to say, okay, well, at no point in his career was he ever a top 5 quarterback, that's understandable. So again, to me, a player like Eli, you can now use the postseason success to break the tie. So again, so he has 2 rings, so obviously he played well during the postseason. So I think because he has 2 rings, you could maybe, skew your argument slightly to say, okay, well, if you thought he wasn't a Hall of Famer, the 2 rings can help you, say, okay, well, with the 2 rings, it now makes him a Hall of Famer. Whereas to me, I don't like going the reverse. I don't like looking at a player, seeing how many rings he has, and then determining whether you should make the Hall of Fame based on that. So that's going to do it for this video. Obviously, if you're a Patriots fan, you're probably going to dislike the video, right? And you're not going to like the take because, again, if you're a fan of that team, you definitely want your player to make it to the Hall of Fame. But I don't know, just to me specifically, I don't look at postseason success and determine whether you're a Hall of Famer based on that. Again, like I said, even my own quarterback in Tony Romo, I don't think that he's a Hall of Famer. But again, had he won a championship or 2, I can see how you could, as a Cowboys fan, definitely try to make the argument. But to me, when you look at Julian Edelman's regular season statistics, just nothing that you look at makes you think he's a Hall of Famer, right? Also, the fact that I don't believe he's ever made a Pro Bowl. So, again, at no point were you ever a top 5, 6, 7, 10 receiver. It's kind of tough to put someone like that in the Hall of Fame just because they had a couple of good postseason games, which is really what it boils down to. So to me, I just can't see myself putting a player into the Hall of Fame, whether it's Julian Edelman or any other player, just based on their postseason success. Like I said, I'm the kind of person that, you know, to make the Hall of Fame, you have to be a very good player at your position, right? So that means over the course of your career, your statistics should be so good in your category, your respective categories, that you deserve Hall of Fame consideration for that. And then if you are close to the Hall of Fame based on your statistics, if you had a good postseason, then I think that should put you over the edge. But I don't think it should work the other way around, where if you had such an amazing postseason, it brings up the statistics or the lack thereof that you had in the regular season. But that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did make it this far, make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe, as it does help the channel out a lot. And thank you guys so much. I look forward for the next video.